Welcome to the Effortless Swimming podcast. My guest today is Dr. Jim Taylor, and not only being an avid triathlete and coming back from Worlds recently, you are here to talk about the mental side of sport and swimming and triathlon. Not only the author of 18 books, but the one that I think is probably most relevant for our audience is Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. So thanks so much for being on the podcast, Jim. I'm looking forward to getting into some topics that I think are relevant for a lot of the athletes that I work with on a very regular basis in terms of just the mental side of swimming and the mental side of triathlon. Because, I mean, personally, I know how important it can be. And when you haven't got a strong mind, well, then all the work that you've done leading up to that, well, it's it all goes by the wayside. So thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here, Brenton. And before we dig in, I want to say thank you to you and to Effortless Swimming. I've learned so much from your videos. I think I've watched every one of your videos. Last fall, I decided that my past strategy for getting faster, of going farther and harder, wasn't working. And I discovered Effortless Swimming. And for the first time ever, I learned how to swim fast. And I've been working on it ever since, and I've gotten a lot faster. So I'm very appreciative of Effortless Swimming, and I'm really happy to be here to share my ideas on another aspect of swimming that we don't really think about too much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and it's great to know that that I'm able to help people like yourself, and then have someone like you reach out and say, look, I reckon we could talk about something that's relevant on the podcast. So that's why I wanted to get you on. So. Just in terms of your background, you've been in this sort of area for about 30 years now, from what I could see. And do you want to just talk a little bit about how that came to be and the type of people that you work with?
Yeah. Well, there's a cliche that people become psychologists to figure themselves out. And I was a head case as an athlete when I was young. Oddly enough, I was not an endurance athlete at all. I was an alpine ski racer. And I discovered sports psychology and applied it to my ski racing and took a quantum leap in my performances, in my rankings. Competed at the international level, although I wasn't near the top. And so when I got to college, I took a psychology class. And the way I put it is that I didn't choose psychology; it chose me. In particular, sports psychology. And so over the years, I've worked with thousands of athletes, from juniors to age groupers to professionals and Olympians. And it's all about helping them understand how the mind impacts performance, and then how to strengthen the mind and how to use the mind as a tool rather than a weapon against them. Because as you talk to any serious athlete at the highest level, they'll tell you how important the mind is, but not a lot is done about it. And so a lot of my work, whether it's here on podcasts or working individually or with teams, is on educating and providing tools to athletes to help them be mentally prepared so they can compete their best when it really matters.
And do you think that training the mental side of things is similar to training the physical side of things, or do you see that it can be quite different?
Yeah. Well, the unfortunate aspect of that is that most people don't put mental training in the same place as physical training, meaning conditioning and the technical side of sport. It's like there's conditioning and technique and nutrition and sports medicine over here. And then it's like the mental side's over here. It's like, we don't need to deal with it until there's a problem. But that doesn't make a lot of sense. That would be like waiting to get injured to start doing conditioning. But of course, on the physical side, you do conditioning to prevent injury. And so I approach it the same way. Another thing I will say is that almost every athlete does mental stuff, meaning they do things to motivate themselves, to stay positive, to relax, to focus. But mental stuff is not mental training. Just like going into the gym and doing some arm curls or some quad strengthening isn't physical conditioning. So what's most important about mental training is to approach it the same way you do the physical and technical aspects of swimming in this particular case. It has to be comprehensive. It has to be structured. It has to be consistent, and there has to be a lot of effort that's put into it.
And I want to go into some of those strategies and ways to train it, because I think because it's so outside of, well, it's not so outside the physical side of things, but because it's less tangible in the way that you can see it, physical, nutrition, all right, that's easy. It's very sort of real world. It's in front of you. But the mental side of things, you see it obviously come out. You see that play out on the sporting field, but it's harder to, I think, see and know how to train it too, because aside from sort of putting in the hard work and building up your capacity that way, it can seem very difficult to train the mind. So how do you deal with that with athletes, and how do you show them that it can actually be trained?
Sure. Well, I think just as I said before, get into think in terms of that it's mental training that you have to train the mind. But you hit the nail on the head, Brenton, that in fact, mental side is harder because you go into the gym, you can see the plates on the bar, you can see the dumbbells you lift. In the pool, you can see the times, the distance. Whereas the mental side, it's not tangible, it's not concrete. And so one thing I do to start with that is to get them to create a vocabulary of things that are concrete. So, for example, I talk about mental muscles. And so, obviously, athletes, swimmers, triathletes can relate to muscles. Muscles of any sort, physical or mental, can be weak, they can be strong, or they can be injured. And so, that's a starting point there. Also, I talk about how athletes need to develop a mental toolbox, and meaning that it's filled with tools they can use when they have challenges that come up mentally. So, the mental toolbox might be positive self-talk. It might be breathing. It might be focused keywords. So by using this vocabulary of mental muscles and mental tools, that starts to make it more tangible. A second part of that is simply helping them understand what these mental areas are. Because again, without a vocabulary and without a way to describe them, you can't grab onto them. You can't wrap your arms around them.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you bring up some of those things in your toolbox. I think the podcast I did just recently was on sort of getting into flow in swimming, and some of the things that talked about there was breathing, using cues or trigger words, and so I think there's a lot of crossover there with that's right, with being in flow, which is often when you're not thinking too much consciously. It's all sort of happening in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. And really flow, that's one word that's used. I use the term prime performance, in this case, prime swimming. And I define it as performing at a consistently high level under the most challenging conditions. And so whatever word you use, you call it in the zone, flow, prime swimming, the idea is get to a place mentally where when it's time to race, whether it's the first leg of a triathlon or a distance swim or a meet in the pool, is being at a place where your mind works with you, not against you, and where you don't have to try. Because one thing I learned from your videos is that you can't try to swim fast. Rather, you just have to do the things necessary that allow fast swimming to come.
Not trying to force it, I think, is one of the big takeaways that people often have when they don't come from that swimming background as a junior, where they think that to go faster, they've got to try just so much harder, and then they end up working against themselves and end up swimming slower and get a lot more tired. But when they just relax and they ease into it, and they just turn up the dial on the effort ever so slightly, well, that's when you see that increase in speed. And do you see there being a crossover with that, and then just with the mental side of things, not trying too hard to do things, not forcing them?
Yeah, very much so. The way I think about it is that initially, just like with physical conditioning, you have to put a lot of effort to get stronger physically. And mentally as well, you have to put in quite a bit of effort and focus on different mental areas to get those mental muscles stronger. But the idea then, when it's time to race, you don't have to think about using those muscles or using those tools. They just come out because you've trained them to use them when necessary.
Before the call, we were talking about some people that you've worked with, and I want to go into the story of the person you helped sort of get over having panic attacks when they were going to do an open water swim, which is a pretty common one from the people that I work with. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, and then some strategies that you used and help this person apply?
Yeah, sure. So certainly open water swimming is a source of fear for most swimmers, at least everyone who's not a very seasoned, experienced open water swimmer. And I was over in the UK in April doing some work with Global Triathlon Network. And I did a segment on issues related to fear and other mental areas. And I get this email from this English fellow who he's a national level triathlete, but he has panic attacks in the water where he has to grab onto the kayak or the sup because he just can't go on. And so it came out of some trauma that he had when he was younger, swimming in open water, where he was just really scared. And so we worked for several sessions on giving him some understanding about what happens physiologically, and then also what he can do to let go of some of some of the panic. And so, and again, none of these things are really rocket science, but it's a matter of applying them in sort of very consistent and focused ways. And what we did was, first of all, a lot of mental imagery. And so mental imagery is the most powerful mental tool there is. That is, in your mind's eye, a lot of people call it visualization. You can call it that if you want. Closing your eyes and seeing and feeling yourself performing the way you want. So what I had him do was, in some past situations where he would start to panic, I had him engage in what's called corrected imagery. So I'd have him replay that memory, but correct the memory, correct the image, and see himself in that situation, but staying relaxed, staying focused, staying positive, and continuing on. And what happens is, by using this imagery, he basically rewired his brain, because these memories were wired in there of panic. And so we were able to, through a lot of imagery, to rewire those and bypass the panic and get him to just be able to imagine himself performing the way he's capable of performing. And then in open water, obviously a lot of breathing. Breathing's so important, and yet it's such a difficult part of swimming, because you can't breathe whenever you want, unlike on a bike or when you're running. And so being very conscious of breathing, because there are a lot of things that we can't control physiologically when we swim. We can't control our heart rate directly. We can't control our adrenaline. We can't control our blood flow. But what we can control is our breathing, which then enables us to control our other physiologies. And so really focusing on the breathing. Also, if you're focusing on breathing, you're not focusing on whatever's scaring the heck out of you, in this particular case of this fellow. And then a lot of positive self-talk. Just having this mantra of, I can do this, stay relaxed, I can get there, just stay focus on the buoy. And by focusing on that over a course of a couple of weeks, he was actually able to let go of a lot of his panic and settle in and have some good performances where he qualified for European championships.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's quite a few things there that resonate. The first one is often, and I had another coach on the podcast, Phil Clayton, who's on the Gold Coast, and he was saying one of the things he does with his athletes in the open water, if they're starting to panic and go into that state, he'll ask them a question out of left field, completely unrelated to swimming, and just distract them. And they're like, "What? What did you say?" Like, and then they just they forget that that they're sort of going. It breaks that kind of breaks that build up of those emotions and those feelings. And then, sorry, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that's a fabulous strategy in that situation, because what happens is, a very brief little bit of neuroanatomy here. So there's a part of our primitive brain called the amygdala, and it's the filter through which all information comes in, and so we can have a quick response if we perceive a threat. So in this case, he was perceiving a threat, so his amygdala was firing and taking control of his brain and his body. So by asking this question, what it does, it engages in a part of our evolved brain called our prefrontal cortex, and basically it disconnects everything that's going on from the amygdala, and enables him to use his prefrontal cortex, which is involved with being rational, being calm, being thoughtful, being deliberate. And so by simply getting him to think about something else, it gets him out of that cycle of that threat physiology that causes the panic reaction.
It's interesting, and it works really, really well. And it's not the only time where I've heard sort of coaches or someone who's looking out for someone just use that tactic and can work really well. And the other one that you mentioned there was going back and not erasing the memory, but just sort of changing the way that you see it. And when you visualize things, especially in a way where they almost feel like they're real, it's very hard to distinguish between what actually happened and what you think happened. So I think it's a really good way to be able to do that. And I think back to like so many of the things that have happened in my life, whether it be like races, sporting achievements, or just like general things in life. They're things that I've seen in my mind first, and I've sort of looked, I've thought about them many, many times, especially I think in my 20s. It was very heavy on the visualization when you're thinking about what sort of life do you want to lead, what do you want to be doing, what do you want to be doing in terms of racing as well. And it's just such a powerful strategy that I think is every successful person or athlete that I've spoken to, they use it, and it's just so powerful.
Yeah, and Brendan, at the heart of all this is really gaining a real understanding about how the mind influences performance, or as you suggest, life. And with that, what happens is, instead of our mind controlling us, and sometimes parts of our mind control us in not healthy ways, whether it's getting really nervous about something that's not really worth getting nervous about, or getting really negative, or not being motivated, and turning that around and taking control of our minds so we can use it to help us achieve our goals. And pretty much everything I do in my work is involved in three key areas. One is helping athletes achieve their goals, because that's why they come to me. But a really important thing about what I do also is that it's not just about swimming or triathlon or sport performance. It's about personal development, helping them become the best versions of themselves. And then the ultimate is mental health. And, anybody who's involved in swimming knows that Michael Phelps and other swimmers are coming out and talking about the mental health challenges that they've had. And so everything I do is about, yes, helping them achieve their performances, but also helping them become the best people and the healthiest people they can be.
Yeah, which is the ultimate goal, really. I mean, I've talked about my dad was my coach growing up, and the number one thing for him with coaching myself and the other athletes, it wasn't about getting the best results as a swimmer. It was about getting the best results for that person in terms of their what kind of person they became, which then can lead to better success on the sporting field. But no one really. You look at at Wimbledon. I don't know if you saw Wimbledon, but the Aussie guy Nick Kyrgios, he's quite polarizing. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him, but he's a very good tennis player. But his attitude and the way that he carries himself doesn't come across as a great person with a great attitude at all. So, and I think that's what puts a lot of people off. And so no one really sort of cares about your sporting success if you are an a-hole. It's like I'd much prefer someone to be a good person and less successful on the sporting field if it's someone that I've got to work with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Good.
And just in terms of the the mental side of things. So over the last sort of 6 months or so, I've a story just about the importance of how you think about things is I've had some stuff happen with my heart, and I had to wait for 6 months to see a cardiologist. And so I wasn't pushing myself and wasn't sure if I had an issue with my heart. And long story short, it all came out okay in the end. But for those 6 months, I wasn't enjoying swimming a lot because I couldn't push myself. And I think mentally in the back of my mind, I was just, because I had to go a bit easy, I didn't feel good in the water, and just my times were very slow. And then as soon as I got the all clear, the next session, I was like, okay, I'm almost back to my normal times. And it was just a mental thing holding me back because I was concerned about this thing in the background. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm really, really excited to go to the pool, to get back there and to start pushing again. But I certainly noticed that in the last 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good example of how the fact that when I talk to swimmers and triathletes about when they compete, especially, is that on race day, they're actually competing in two races. And I don't mean two actual swim races. There's the obvious one, of course, where you're swimming against your competitors. And actually, you know what? There's actually three now that I think about it, especially in triathlon. The first, of course, again, you're trying to beat your competitors and get the best result you can. But before you can win that race, there's another race you need to win. And that's the race against the conditions. And again, that's where, especially open water, that can be a real problem, whether it's cold or there's big waves. I don't know if you saw Escape from Alcatraz, some of the worst possible conditions. And I've done Alcatraz 4 times, and jumping into the water from a perfectly functioning boat in the middle of San Francisco Bay is definitely a scary situation. But it's cold. There's the currents. There's the waves. You have to be able to overcome those conditions. But before you can win that race, there's a more fundamental race you have to win, and that's the mental race against yourself. And ultimately, I think most of us at this point, unless you're at the very top level, whether you're age group swimmers or triathletes, it's really just the challenge and the joy of it is, in fact, overcoming yourself and being able to win that mental race. Because if you don't win that mental race, you can't beat the conditions. You can't beat your competitors. So it really starts all there. And it's a matter of what do you need to do then to win that mental race that will then enable you to, again, overcome the conditions and your other competitors. So I found that that's a really nice way to think about it, is that on race day, it's really, I'm racing against myself first. And whose side am I going to be on? And because I can assure you, I didn't grow up swimming. I didn't do a lap until I was well into adulthood. Didn't learn to turn my head in doing laps until then. And so swimming doesn't come naturally to me, and it's always a challenge. for me. And so being out in open water the first part of a race and going like, boy, I'm hating this. I'm not having a good time. This hurts. It's like game over. And one thing I've really, one of the funny things about what I do for a living is that I have to practice what I preach. And so it wouldn't be good for me to be like really negative about myself or unmotivated or unfocused. I've had to apply a lot of these things to myself, and I'm my own client in a way, and my own guinea pig to see what works and what doesn't. And one of the most basic things when it's difficult is just staying positive and staying on your side. It's like, okay, this is hard, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing because I want to win all three of those little races that I mentioned.
Yeah, it's and so much of it is the approach that you take to it. Like the first one is the whatever result you get today, it's not the result that you're going to get tomorrow, and just taking each race as a learning experience and knowing that you're probably not going to get everything right. And I mean, you even see it if you watch any of Lionel Sanders' videos or any of those top pro triathletes. They talk about the mental side of things as they were going through the race, and they haven't got it nailed every time. And it most of the time it is a big, it's the mental side of things that often lets them down. Yeah, sometimes physically on the day things aren't right, but you didn't talk about, I let this get to me, or I pushed too hard because my ego got involved and then I blew up. And it's very much mental that way. And the other one too, like you talked about being a guinea pig, I find a very similar thing. It's like I can learn a lot that I can use to coach other people by being the guinea pig. And I can't, it's a similar thing. I feel the pressure of not having to do what I preach, which is a good thing. It keeps you accountable.
Right, for sure. Yeah. And I thought it might be interesting to your audience to talk a little bit about some of the mental muscles that I focus on. Because again, what's really important is everybody knows the mind is so important. But when clients first come to me and I say, like, oh, you're obviously here because you know the mind is important. Like, what aspect of the mind are you struggling with? And they go, well, I don't really know. It's just like my mind's not working for me. And so again, creating that vocabulary is really important. And there are a couple of mental muscles that I think are most fundamental to swimming performance and athletic performance and life performance in general. Motivation, confidence, intensity. And when I talk about intensity, I don't mean like mental intensity like this. I mean physiological intensity from being really relaxed to being really intense. And somewhere in that continuum, you swim your best. Focus, obviously swimming is so technical and it's so important to have that constant focus in an environment where it's easy to drift off because you're just looking at the bottom of a pool. And then emotions. Emotions play a huge role in ultimately how somebody performs. So motivation, confidence, intensity, focus, and emotions are the five mental muscles that I focus on most to help strengthen in the athletes I work with.
And is there one or two of those that are most common that people either think they need to work on or you see as them needing to work on?
Yeah. So, I mean, they're all important and they all present challenges, but I would say the first two mostly. First, motivation, because motivation is the foundation of everything. And yes, hopefully I'm not going to insult the real swimmers in our audience, that swimming for many, many swimmers, especially what Lionel Sanders calls adult onset swimmers, it's not inherently fun. It's repetitious. There's not much of a view, things like that. And so for a lot of swimmers, it's hard to get in the pool and do the work. And especially if you're not very good at it, it's just not fun to have being in a lane and have people flying by you. And so motivation is a big challenge. It's like, why are you out there? What are you getting out of it? And what do you want? And a personal experience. I mean, two winters ago, I actually almost gave up on swimming. Not that I was going to stop, but that I decided I wasn't getting any better. And I was working so hard, and there was no reward for it. I was working so hard. I was suffering. I live at elevation a lot of the time in the Northern California mountains, and doing intervals at elevation are really unpleasant. And I wasn't being rewarded for it. And so thankfully I discovered effortless swimming, and I found a purpose and a focus, and that totally changed my motivation. And now I love swimming and I love going to the pool and suffering through intervals. And so motivation is really important, because without motivation, nothing else matters. You're not going to get up and go to the pool at 5:30 in the morning or at the end of the day. And then confidence. Confidence is so important because you might have the physiological and technical capabilities to go the distance at a certain pace, but if you don't believe you have that ability, you're not going to use that ability. And so much of what I do in the pool and what I encourage triathletes and swimmers to do in the pool is not only develop the physical and technical capabilities to go fast, but also develop that belief that if they train properly, they're going to be able to maintain that goal pace and achieve their goals in the swim or the segment of the triathlon.
I like it. And with motivation, it's like when you mention motivation, in my mind, I think back to the book that is The Power of Habit. I think it is of it's escaped me now, but anyway, a book I read recently, and in that book they talk about like motivation only get you so far. It's the habits that you build. But it sounds like what you're talking about there is, well, if you've got the kind of like that, if you've got something that's drawing you to do it because you find it more enjoyable, and it doesn't need to be more enjoyable because it's necessarily easy. You're probably still putting in the work, but you've got something to work on, and you know what you can actually do to improve. That is what helps get you to the pool. That's what has that motivation to get you there.
Well, that's certainly part of it. And the book is The Power of Habit, I think you're thinking of.
What did I say? Yeah, The Power of Habit.
Power of Habit, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, you have to ask yourself, why am I going? And is it important to me? And so it might be certain goals could be competitive goals, for example. And so for me, I'm a faster runner. And so I need to get faster as a swimmer if I want to be really competitive at the world level. So that's motivating for me because I'm a competitive guy and I want to achieve goals. And so having those goals is, goal setting is one of the most robust areas of research in sports psychology. And one thing that's very clear is that if you have clearly defined goals you set for yourself, you're going to be more motivated. Because for some reason, we're wired to connect with goals. I mean, as you well know, Brenton, one of the great joys in life and fulfilling aspects of life is setting a goal, working toward a goal, and achieving a goal. So having goals is really important. Also, though, there are a lot of things that bring people to the pool. I'm super technical, so I love getting into the high elbow and the catch, and it's like all your videos. I mean, I was going crazy over them because I was looking at all the little nuances and seeing how it affects me. So it could be technical aspects, just loving the drilling and getting better technically. It can be just enjoying the freedom and the quiet of the water, something that simple. I mean, swimming is in a way an isolation chamber. And it's a wonderful place to just be within yourself. And yes, they have the waterproof Bluetooth headsets and all that. And if people are into that, that's fine. But it's really therapeutic to just get out there and just let your mind be quiet. Also, though, I have a good friend of mine who's also a world level age grouper, and when she just trains by herself, it just sucks the joy out of it. So she joined a swim team, a swim club recently, and she gets out there and she's inspired by other people and she's motivated by other people. So there are a lot of things that motivate people to get in the water and do the work. And what's really important is to figure out what motivates you. And for some, I mean, it also some rewards. Like for me, I'm a carrot cake dessert guy. And so every Saturday I get myself a piece of carrot cake, and that's my little reward for doing the work all week long, not only in the pool, but on the bike and the weight room and running as well. So it's really important to look at those things and then use some of the tools like goal setting, like focusing on the present, like having teammates and that support. Those are all really great ways to get yourself to be motivated.
Yeah, I think about what motivates me to get to the pool, and there's so many different things. Like I love how it makes me feel, particularly after a session, like just to get that workout. I like the people that I swim with, so the social side of it is a big one. I like being good at something as well, and I like being challenged in that way, because when you put the time into something, you get more confidence and you really enjoy it a lot more. And so the better you get, I think the more you tend to enjoy doing it. And another one too is that it's I feel just throughout the day, it's the thing that keeps me level. So if I've started my day with the swim, the rest of the day, goes really well. And I notice if I haven't been to the the pool. And I certainly noticed that over COVID. Like I ended up going out into the mountains and like running heaps and riding heaps when the pools weren't open, like just to try and get my fix and to and to have that sort of calm state. But I never quite got there without the swimming. And I think a large part of that is that isolation, just the shutting all the noise out. There's no technology. You're forced to just be in your mind, and it's very much meditation for me.
Sure. And let's be realistic, Brenton. You're a swimmer. And so, of course, it's much more satisfying for you to swim than for you to maybe run or bike, which can be certainly satisfying. But your identity as a swimmer, and obviously with your effortless swimming business and so on, it's a source of great satisfaction and meaning and joy. And I can totally relate during COVID when all the pools shut down. Fortunately, I live a good part of the year near San Francisco. And so I swim in Aquatic Park. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's this one sort of closed-in ass area of San Francisco Bay that has buoys and about a mile loop you can do, and as well as a shorter buoy course. And I can assure you, there's no joy in swimming in San Francisco Bay in March or April because it's about 50 degrees and unbelievably cold. But I swam there probably over those next couple of months till pools open probably 25, 30 times. And I felt like a really, really tough guy too. So there's a real psychology to it as well. Unfortunately, in a sort of a funny sort of way, is there's the South End Rowing Club and the Dolphin Club are these two swim clubs there where people swim in the bay without wetsuits. And so it's always humbling because they're way tougher than I am. That's for sure. But for you in your swimming, it was a source of sort of therapy, if you will. It was good for you in terms of your mental health, not just in terms of your fitness.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I mean, even the cold water swimming. So like, we did a little bit of the open water swimming over COVID and things like that. And there's quite a few down here where I live who swim every day, no wetsuit. And for them, it's become this ritual for them where they love the feeling of the cold water, and you build up your tolerance to it, but you get out and you feel amazing afterwards. But it's also that identity thing and how you think other people perceive you. It's kind of like someone getting a sports car, and you think people looking at you going, geez, this guy is cool, or this guy makes a lot of money, when most people are thinking you're an idiot. But yeah, I think that when I get out of the surf, right, if it's big surf, I will come out and there's people watching the waves. You think, yeah, I'm pretty good. I've just been out in big waves. But I think you can kind of play into that of what you think other people might think of you, or even how you perceive yourself. You can really just lean into it, and it can help you. And I see it with triathletes too. It's like they love the feeling of being a triathlete, being really fit and doing all this stuff, and they carry that as part of their identity. But that can also be a huge thing that motivates them to train so much.
Right. And I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword in some ways, is because to be a triathlete or a serious swimmer, you have to invest a lot of time and energy and certainly money on the triathlon side for sure. And that can be great in terms of motivator, but it can also be a demotivator, because basically it's the idea that if every time you race, you're putting your identity, your value of yourself on the line. And that's where a healthy perspective is really, really important. And I find this up to the pros that I work with in triathlon, that even them, where this is their livelihood, and they're trying to win Kona, they're trying to win the PTO events, Collins Cup, and so there's a lot on the line, and yet their ability to keep perspective enables them to go faster. Because the fact is, as you suggest, Brenton, when we think other people are thinking this or that about us, they're not.
Yeah,
because we're not that important, except to our family and our friends. What we're doing, we're mind reading, but we're not reading their minds. We're reading our minds, and so we want to feel of value and worthwhile. And that's really perfectly good and valuable. But it's a matter of maintaining a healthy perspective of why I'm out here. Because as an age grouper, yeah, I mean, if I go to Worlds or not, or if I have a good race or not, nobody cares except me. But the fact that I care, and I approach it in a healthy way, that I might never be the very best in the world, but if I can be competitive, then that's pretty darn good. And I can tell you, I get such joy out of my triathlon training now, including swimming, thanks to you. And so I think what's really important is for swimmers and triathletes to keep in mind about why they do it, and to really understand what the satisfaction is, because we can't always control our results. Sometimes we just bunk. And Sam Long, this happened to challenge Roth, where he was off the bike in great shape, and then he just blew up on the run, and that happens. But he had a really good perspective about it, and he's going to learn from it, and he's going to move on and continue to get better.
So it's very much the story that you tell yourself, isn't it? You could completely go on one side or the other, and if you can tell yourself the right story or frame it in the right way, well, that can be the difference between maybe having like something attached to challenge Roth. Every time you go back there, that's the race that I bonked at. It's probably going to happen again. Or that's the difference between thinking, oh well, that's that was just a once off, and I know I've done the right things to be able to make a difference next time I race.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think my approach to mental training is really to think about, and here's some suggestions for your audience, is think about like, what mental areas do I struggle with? And again, I think you can work think in terms of motivation, confidence, intensity, meaning nerves is the high end of that, focus, and emotions. And then to pick out a couple of tools that they can use to help them deal with some of these challenges. Because the fact is the mind is so powerful. And if we don't do something about it to take control of it and to use it to help us, then it's going to take control of us, and it's going to take us down a bad road. And Brenton, here's a good metaphor I use is this doesn't apply so much maybe in swimming, I suppose, but is a fork in the road, or you go off course. You're in open water swimming, you go off course. And you going off course is a metaphor here for you go to the dark side if you're a Star Wars fan, where you go negative, or you start to panic, or you get nervous, or you start to think you just can't, you're not going to finish your goal time. And when you veer off course, if your mind goes off course, your body's going to go off physically or metaphorically off course as well. So a great way to think about swimming, now that I think about it, and I'm just making this off course stuff up right as we speak, is that always try to get your mind to stay on course. And on course is whatever your goal, whatever your purpose is out there. Whether it's in the pool where you've got a really hard workout and it's really hard, or a really long swim or tough conditions, making sure that your mind stays on course. Because if your mind stays on course, then your body will follow. And that's the ultimate goal. And so being in that situation where if you start to go off course in terms of negativity or distraction or lack of motivation, say, wait a minute, what do I need to do here? What tools can I use to get myself back on course so I can finish the swim in a good way?
And I think it's really good to just have that like a daily or at least weekly sort of practice with the mental side of training, like we talked about at the start, because I think back to when I was training as a teenager. We were swimming, I think, 7 or 8 times a week with a couple of gym sessions in there, really fit, trained really hard. And you've also got a coach there and your other teammates, and there's really good culture of pushing one another and not giving in, all that sort of stuff. And so I feel like I developed that really well through my teenage years. And then as you get a bit older, you don't necessarily have that environment or the coach there working with you, drilling it into you on a regular basis. So it's easy to let it slip away. But every time I come back to talking with someone like yourself, or get into a really good squad environment, and you get challenged and you get pushed, it's you just go so much. I go so much better in that sort of environment where it is where you're reminded of it on a regularly, because it is easy just to kind of forget about, and if you let it go by the wayside, well, I think you can just mentally get a little bit weaker, like anything that you don't train.
Yeah. And for me, the most fundamental aspect of being the best swimmer you can be is consistency. And obviously you just said you were swimming 7 or 8 times a week. And, Caleb Dressel, he's in the pool for, I don't know how many yards and hours a week as the best in the world. And so it's that consistency of training that plays a big role, but also the consistency of mind. And a lot of the mental training, it's about creating a consistently strong mind. And so because the fact is that, swimming back and forth in a pool, that has its challenges, but going to open water has far more challenges in a lot of ways. And so it's not about being able to just feel confident and motivated and relaxed and focused and good when you're doing laps in pool training. It's about in the race, in the pool, or in the open water. How do you respond to those challenges? Because yes, swimming is a very simple environment, but there are certainly challenges that you face in terms of how you feel physically and who you're competing against and what your goals are. And then you go out to open water and there's the whole plethora of additional environmental challenges. And so the ultimate goal is what can you do to ensure that when you're faced with those challenges, that you respond positively. And as you suggested with the book, The Power of Habit, it's a process, but ultimately it's a habit of ingraining by strengthening your mental muscles, by having access to these mental tools in your mental toolbox, so that the natural habit is to stay on course and to stay positive and motivated and focused and relaxed. And that doesn't just happen, oh, I'm going to start thinking positively on race day. That's like saying, I'm going to start, doing conditioning on race day. It's not going to work. It's about developing a program and a process where every day, in fact, every time you go into the pool or every time you go in open water, you have something you're working on mentally. And so by doing that, like, for example, every time you have a hard workout, I'm going to focus on just being really positive. And when I say that, I don't mean loving it. I don't mean swimming, let's say, like tomorrow I have to do 5 200s at race pace. It's not going to be fun. But to say, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep pushing because this is going to help me achieve my goals. And so having that at your disposal every day you train, what you're doing is, as you suggest, ingraining that way of thinking, that way of feeling, that way of responding to challenges as a habit. So on race day, what's going to come out? Whatever the habit is.
Yeah, it's my next question is going to be, how do you ingrain those? How do you do those things on a daily basis? But you talked about it there. It's like it's setting these little challenges in a session every single time. And as a swimmer, some things you can do in there is it might be a certain breathing pattern that you're looking to hold. It might be a certain pace that you're looking to hold in a set. It could be trying to hold the same sort of stroke count or number of kicks off the wall if you're more a pool-based swimmer. So there's all these little things that you can set for yourself along the way that make it a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable. And you want to set those targets just above like a range that you think you could do, or at a range that you think you could do if you're really trying and if you're really switched on. And it's all those, again, thinking back to when I was a teenager training that often, it's all those little things that you'd be able to do once or twice a day with your 2 sessions. It's like, you just build that confidence every single time, and that carries into other things that you do, whether it be academics or work. You build up that mental toughness and ability to push through, that it carries across to all other aspects of your life. And that's why I think swimming's such a good sport, because it is tough, but if you can learn to stay calm under pressure, and learn to push yourself. It's like that balance between tension and relaxation. It's just such a good sport to be able to teach people things that will help them for other areas of their life.
Without a doubt. And I think that if swimmers can apply a lot of the ideas that they use on the technical and physical side to their mental training, then they can make some real gains. And so every time you go to the pool, I assume you've got a training program. Like, I've got a workout I'm going to do tomorrow morning, and that my coach developed for me. But also at the same time, I'm going to be working on something mental. So think in terms of the 3 areas: physical, technical, and mental. And so every time I go to the pool, and what swimmers should do is to have a specific goal they want to work on, something they want to achieve in that workout, physically, technically, and mentally. And it could also be, you can also actually add in a tactical thing like maintain a certain pace. And so if you can have that awareness of what you're doing with your mind, then with that awareness, just like if you notice you're dropping your elbow, you go, okay, I need to get it back up. Same thing with mental. It's like, I'm halfway through these sets, and man, I'm getting down on myself, and I'm thinking like I want to get out of the pool. It's like, wait a minute. Here's some things I can do to motivate myself. So I'm going to focus on my goal of, I'm going to Worlds in November in Abu Dhabi, and I need to do the work, or I need to do whatever I need to do mentally to achieve those goals. So with that awareness, then you can do something about it, and that is use some of the tools of positive self-talk, breathing, relaxing the body, whatever it might be, to strengthen the mind. And if you keep doing that over and over and over again, just like good technique, then over time it becomes habit. And then on race day, you don't have to think about it at all because it's so well ingrained.
And some of those strategies and tactics, we talked about it in the beginning, but for those listening, what's the best way to either get in touch with you or read more, or get some of the stuff that you've covered here?
Sure.
So you've got the book, Train Your Mind for Athletic Success, which I saw is on your website. It's on Amazon. So what are some of those places that people can get in touch with you?
So I do a ton of writing, and you can go to my website, drjimtaylor.com, drjimtaylor.com, and I've got literally thousands of blog posts on the psychology of sport. I've got a specific page for a specific category for triathlon. And so just tons of things to read, all free. If you want to buy my book, that's great too, of course. And then I've got my contact information, my email and my phone number. I work with athletes all over the world remotely. Long before COVID came along, I've worked with athletes remotely. And so if I can help in any way, either formally, like hire me, or even informally, just asking me a question, I always respond to my emails. I have a great passion for what I do, and I'm here to help people. So my website's the place to start.
Fantastic. Well, I can tell that you've done this for a long time. You know your stuff back to the front, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you. So I'll have you back on the podcast sometime this year again, because I've gotten a lot out of it, and I'm sure those listening will have as well. And if you are listening to this podcast, send me an email. Is there some questions that you'd like to ask Jim here, or have you got any maybe stories of when you have managed to make that switch and change your thinking? So, Jim, thanks very much for being on the podcast. It's been fantastic, and looking forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Yeah, great fun, Brenton. Really enjoyed it.